we're going to do a little video, probably a big video on natural law. So natural law, I did a video on this about 5 years ago, but I've learned a lot of things in the meantime, you know. Lots about Zen, which came from Buddhism, when that got transferred from India into China. And so there's elements of Taoism and Confucianism. I've been listening to a lot of Alan Watts. And along with Alan Watts, just relating all of his lectures on YouTube, you can find them, highly recommend them. Relating all those to the Egyptian Seven Natural Laws. The correspondences are insane. It's like basically the same thing, you know. And it's just cool because it doesn't mean that the Buddha, you know, studied in the mystery schools under the pyramid, like the cult of Osiris. It doesn't mean he was an initiate. We're sort of all initiates in the school of life, you know. It's like there's certain people that are just born knowing and understanding these laws, you know, and other people have to learn them because the whole concept of non-dualism is kind of tricky for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, you know. So that's why I'm here. I'm going to be the middleman between source, okay, and you. I'm going to help you guys reach out for the common benefit of both, all right? That's what the holy science is. That's what Hermeticism is, okay? So what we're going to do is start with the first natural law first. And these aren't like what it says, right? It's natural. So this isn't man-made law. These are just how the universe operates, right? And if we understand that, then the universe will benefit and we'll benefit as well, because we're in the flow. We're not trying to go against the grain, right? So the first principle is the principle of mentalism, the fact that all is mind and the mind is all, right? And this is like crucial in a lot of different mysticism, if you want to call it that. But in Taoism, that's what Taoism is. That's the Tao, okay? It's everything. It's the ineffable God, as you will. In India, it's the Brahma, okay? So it's God as the West thinks of it, which I don't know what they think of it really. I don't think they think that there's a man in the sky, right? But whatever their concept of God is, like a ruling God or a wrathful God or whatever, is just not the case, right? The all is mind and all is God. So everything is a component of God, right? We all basically live in God's mind, if you will. And I'm going to save some of the other concepts for these later principles in the Seven Natural Laws, but that's basically all it's saying is. And the Tao is like really hard to explain because you know, it's just one of those concepts that you're not supposed to really understand. Like, it's the ineffable means you can't understand it. You know, we're just human. It's very difficult for us to even try to understand it. So like, it's almost like don't try too hard type of deal. It's the Tao. Just know that everything is a component of God. It's the Brahma. And then in Indian, the Indian yogi would tell you that the Atman is the individual life spark of the Brahma in each sentient being, in each particle. Okay, it has that God particle in it, which isn't a particle. We'll get to that, right? But what you need to know is that everything has this Atman in it, the individual life spark of the Brahman. And it's almost like the original whole scattered into multiplicity, okay? And our goal is to expand our consciousness into losing ourself and understanding that we are everything, okay? So when we understand ourself, we understand God, and when we understand God, we understand ourself. So the whole thing is to not ascend matter, all right, because they're crucial. Like they're, nature isn't bad. Say in certain religions like Christianity and stuff, they say when Eve ate of the apple, that's when evil kind of set upon man, and then that's when nature kind of turned evil. Well, nature isn't evil, okay? There's cycles and stuff, and it's natural. So what's good is natural. Anything that's synthetic, that's not good, right? So that's what we want to get back to, is not the concept of good and evil, but the concept of natural and synthetic, all right? So when we are expanding back into the multiplicity, we're losing the identity of self, because there is no self, right? It's just we put names on things to categorize them, to explain them. We have cycles and time and calendars and stuff. These are all man-made. These are all concepts. They're not real, right? Everything is in a constant state of flux, and it's always changing. So nothing is stagnant, right? We'll learn those in these next principles, but everything is always changing, so there is no self to hold on to. We are the universe observing itself, right? We like to think of ourselves as separate from nature. We call it nature. Well, we are nature, right? We came from the earth. We are the earth. Like, there's no difference in it, right? So it's almost like saying, categorizing things into breaking it apart and calling everything different things. There's a corn on the cob, right? That's one. And then you take off the little kernels, the little niblets, and then all of a sudden it became many things, all right? But it's still the corn. So that's kind of like the universe and us. We're all one organism as a society and people, plus we're all one, period. We're all one. So that's what the Tao is. It just is. You can't explain it. It just is. It's been here since the beginning of time, from the first emanation. It's always going to be here too. And that's what our consciousness is. It's the universal unconscious that Carl Jung spoke about. That is the Tao. You can't destroy it. It's that's what our consciousness is. We're not conscious, right? There's no I to die and reincarnate. What reincarnates is just that awareness, okay? So if you release what you aren't to reveal what you are, you start to understand, I'm not this body, this and that. But then you start to notice, I'm not a soul either, okay? I have the same consciousness that everything else does. I'm not more important than a leaf on a tree, right? Because once we get into non-dualism, the tree is just as important as man, right? Because it's the other half of our lungs. So without it releasing oxygen and using our carbon dioxide that we release, symbiotic relationship, neither would be able to exist. So we are crucial for the universe to be alive and to flourish, and we also need the universe to flourish. So the goal isn't asceticism, to be a recluse and to ascend matter. We need to expand our consciousness to involve everything, right? So the Bodhisattva way in Buddhism is to understand that in order to awaken yourself, if we are all one, and if everybody is a fragment of the whole, okay, then we need to help each other awaken if we know certain things in order to put the puzzle back together. Like when a monk is meditating, he's not escaping into the void. Alan Watts puts it like he is space, okay, because space still contains everything. It's not emptiness. He's returning to everything. He's just not attached. Therefore, once you lose your ego or yourself, then you're just free, You're you're not tied down to any identity. Your identity is now the universe, right? So anyway, that's a long form of speaking about the Tao, and the all is mind. We exist inside the mind of the all, right? And anyways, I just wanted to stress a lot of those points because that's fundamental for these other principles. That's like the main thing, right? And that's the difference between spirituality and religion. And I personally feel that spirituality in the mainstream, at least in the West, has returned to that religious ideal that in the 60s, the new spiritual movement here in North America, what we tried to get away from, like, you know, what Alan Watts like kind of ushered in and stuff, like the whole, it wasn't solely up to him. There's a bunch of people in that new thought movement, especially around the early 1900s, like where this all comes from, the Kabbalah by the three initiates. Lots of great stuff came around that time for the Western, like occultism, you could say. But in this modern age, 2026, it's getting back to religion, you know, where everybody's talking about God, and they all feel like they're God fearing, you know. You don't have to fear God. We'll get into things, but it's nature is cyclical, right? The true God is death and rebirth, okay? There's not a God and a devil, right? There's just knowing this Seven Hermetic Principles and trying to expand into nature, basically, okay, and return back to that consciousness that we are, and to lose ourself. Okay, that's the goal. That's how we get closer to God, right? And the opposite of God isn't the devil. The opposite of God, in my opinion, is ignorance, okay? So that's when you're not out for your fellow man, you're selfish, okay? And you have a strong sense of self, and you're not selfless, right? That's the opposite of God. It's not that there is no devil. It doesn't exist. There's one consciousness in this earth, and it's a creator and destroyer, okay? And both are essential for one another, okay? So we're going to move into these other principles, and you'll see why that's the case. I just wanted to add that since this principle is called mentalism, that the all is mind, right? It's Carl Jung said that the subjective creates the objective. So whatever's in our mind, okay, is what our reality is. So if you believe in heaven and hell and stuff, and you believe that this is a prison planet, that's what you're going to see. Once you start to understand these principles, and you know that everything is a component of God, okay, that's now what you see. You start to live in heaven once you lose yourself, right? And that's what they don't want. That's what the powers that be don't want. Because the Freemasons, okay, the people that run this planet, right? Illuminati at its highest scale, it knows this. What's their logo? The all-seeing eye, right? So they understand the all. The whole blocks in the pyramid is to block out that information from getting out to people, because it's liberating, right? They get liberated from the chains through gnosis, okay? And the whole thing is they don't want that, right? They want you feeling like you're in hell, so you become a consumer, and you start to seek synthetic paths to numb yourself, basically, right? So we're not doing that. We're trying to wake up, okay? And we're not trying to do that. So okay, second principle. The principle of correspondence, okay? As above, so below, and as below, so above. So how can we put this into digestible words here? So as above, so below. Let's get into it like this. You know how I said that everything is the Tao, right? Well, the principle of correspondence is that there's a certain formula, let's say, for this earth, okay? And we'll get into what that formula is in the next principles. But right now, all you need to understand is everything, every plane, every observable plane on this universe acts off the same principles, okay? These 7 Hermetic Laws, but even just one principle. And an example of that is an atom, okay, with its nucleus and its electrons orbiting it. You see that on a grander scale in the planet with the moons orbiting it, if you believe in that cosmology, okay? You know, if you believe in spherical planets and all that, if we take that to be true, which technically it should be, okay? If everything's a correspondence of each other, we could understand the macrocosm by understanding the microcosm, by looking, and vice versa. It gets pretty trippy, like it gets to be like simulation theory, but it's not a theory, it's like actually how the world is, okay? And we think simulation is like kind of fake, but all a simulation is like different resolutions of the same formula, kind of like a Mandelbrot equation, okay? So how that works is, Mark Passio talks about this, how a simulation and a hologram, our universe is holographic, because if you have a hologram of a person, a man standing there, okay, and you take away the bottom quarter of the image, so you take away his leg, one of his legs, okay, what are you going to be left with the photo you take away and the photo that remains? You're not going to be left with a picture of his leg and a picture of him missing a leg. What you're left with is a picture, 1/4 of the resolution, so super grainy, but you can barely make out the whole man. Both his legs are there. And then the remaining picture in a hologram is now 3/4 of the resolution. So his whole body's there, 2 legs, 2 arms, everything. It's just a little bit more grainy. So, the resolution is a little bit less. And that's the fact, like, of our whole universe, that through every plane, they're just different resolutions of the same thing. So when you look at a stick man, a drawing of a stick man, our brain interprets that as a man. Like in art and fine art and stuff, it's called something where our mind seeks out faces and shapes and stuff, in the dark you can convince yourself you see things, like in a black mirror and stuff. Our mind kind of plays tricks on us because it's used to looking for these patterns, right? So in fine art, there's a very rudimentary shape. Our mind fills in the rest of the resolution, and our brain understands what it is. Oh, that's a man. You know what I mean? We can interpret in our mind that he has fingers and he has a face and all that. So in reality, that's how it operates, right? There's a Buddhist koan talking about how if you have a thimble of water and you observe how the water moves, without somebody seeing an ocean, without ever seeing an ocean in their entire life, they can assume how an ocean would operate, because it's on a grander scale. It's almost like a higher resolution of the same little thing, right? But it's just trippy because, like, it's almost like in a video game, right? Like Minecraft. So in Minecraft, it works off procedural generation. There is certain codes in that the developers made, that in the game, the game keeps creating the farther you walk. It'll never end. You know what I mean? It's not like an open world game where there's the edge of the map and you can't go any further. There's mathematical equations where it'll just keep, procedurally generating. That's how our universe is, right? Wherever we look, there'll be stuff there because we're looking, right? Just like the whole pinhole experiment, the observer makes a big difference, and our universe is just one equation. It's not hard to understand. Once you start to understand these next principles, is that like every plane of existence works off these principles. So say like what we're getting into, these principles you can apply to everything in life, okay? And then you don't have to know everything in the world. You just have to know these 7 principles, and you can apply them to every situation. It's a cheat code, basically, is what it is. Because in the West, we like to over-intellectualize everything, and we're reading, and we say knowledge is power. Knowledge isn't power. It's wisdom that's power, right? And the point of Taoism is not to learn things, but it's to unlearn things and to let certain things that we've been indoctrinated into, and just like, we're lost in the sauce here on the West. We have to unlearn things, and the process of dismissing what we're not to reveal what we are, right? Like Michelangelo said that he freed the angel from the marble, which means in the West, we like to look at God like he's external to us. We're adding him to a canvas, like it's paint on a canvas, if we're using art as a metaphor. In the East, it's more like sculpting, where it's removing the impurities of the stone to reveal the beauty inside of it. So God is inside of us all, right? And we just have to lose certain concepts. We're lost in the sauce right now, right? We have to lose those concepts to reveal the inner gnosis and knowing and knowledge. If you're watching this video, it's because you don't understand these things, but there's people that were born with this knowledge inherent to them, like the Buddha, like Jesus, all the ascended masters, right? And this is just people in Egypt, people made it into a science. That's why it's called the holy science, because like alchemy, it's inner work when you understand the science of the universe, right? It's a symbiotic relationship. So that's why they say that it's like man and universe reaching out for the common benefit of both, because you benefit and the universe benefits too. Right now in our Christian society, who's benefiting? Maybe people are benefiting, but the like nature sure isn't benefiting, right? We're destroying the planet, and we're selfish because we think we're removed from nature, and we think it's primal and ugly, and we have to ascend our reptilian brain and all that. But that's not the case, right? We just have to surrender to becoming one with everything. Just like all the shamanic traditions in the West too, I can't dismiss those, like early Native American stuff. They knew what was up, right? They had a very holistic way of being, but in modern times we don't understand that. So that's why we have to get back to the old way, right? So that's a principle of correspondence. If we get into the next one, principle of vibration. Nothing rests and everything moves, everything vibrates. The universe is in a constant motion. Okay, so the specific vibration that the universe is at in motion, first of all, everything is in a constant state of returning to the all, okay? The universe is like, we're all dying, slowly dying, and that's just the way it is. Vibration, in order to live, we must die. It's on off, everything's on off. So even metal, right, it starts to rust, and the earth reclaims these particles and starts to break them down, and it's fine. It's just the way it is. It's okay, it's natural, it's good, it's all good. That's just the way it is, and that's the way it always has been. We look at death as negative, but how is death negative, right? It's just a way of life. We need to embrace that and be comfortable with that. It's fine. Like we discussed already, there's no I to die, so we'll just be another manifestation of the universal consciousness in whatever it is. But we won't remember or care because there's no we. Okay, so the vibration thing is very true. Like a vibration is a waveform, right? And everything has an ebb and flow, and those peaks and valleys are crucial to one another. We'll get into that in these further principles. Like a lot of these principles, they like kind of like there's a gradient in between them, and they flow into each other nicely, but they are all separate for a reason, these 7 laws. So in the principle of vibration is that in the West, in a lot of places in the world, right, modern science tells us that everything is atomic, right? And an atom is a particle. In like particle physicists talk about an atom because it's the uncuttable thing, right? And I'm pretty sure that's what CERN is doing with the Hadron Collider. They're trying to split the atom. They're obsessed with it, not knowing that in the atom, okay, is not a particle at all. They call it the God particle, but it's not a particle. It's a waveform. It's a vibration. Everything in this world is vibrating. Okay, where everything isn't particles, matter. It's all vibration. So that's what this principle is trying to tell people, is that, and the wave is just so crucial to understanding these next principles too, because it's a relationship where if everything was just stagnant, then there would be nothing, right? Like we have to have the ebb and flow of a wave. And the trippy thing is that a wave like this, if you look at it from the side, like if you look like straight down a wave, it's a spiral. And the spiral is super big. That's another one of those cheat codes in the law of correspondence, where the spiral exists at all perceivable planes of matter too, from the micro to the macro. Like a little seashell, you see the spiral, and in a universe you see a spiral, okay, or a galaxy rather. So the whole thing with a spiral is that if you take a spiral and don't look at the top of it, but you flip it on its side like a wave, right, and it gets bigger, it's ascending, like it's growth. So that's basically what this law is talking about in everything is vibration, is that everything's constantly growing, right? It's not, or dying. It's growing and dying at the same time. Is a trippy thing. But if for ourselves, right, if we just say stagnant and not grow, it's that's not the point of Zen in Wow Way, the whole non-trying thing. It's not non-trying, like, or being like centered in the way that being centered is like a limp rag on a clothesline. Okay, that's how Alan Watts puts it. It's not that. It's that you're centered in life and you're just comfortable while moving and doing stuff and still growing, right? And trying to help other people grow. We'll get into those principles in the future, but the whole waveform is just so essential to everything, because like I said, it's like as above, so below, where the things that exist in our universe are put there for a reason. That's kind of getting complex for this principle, so we'll move on and then we'll start to explain what I'm talking about in these next principles, right? So after vibration, you get the principle of polarity, okay? So everything is dual and everything has its poles. So that's the cheat code that I was talking about earlier, right? Is where if you just know that one principle, you have the cheat code to life, because you're not an extremist to either side, right? You're not scapegoating anybody on either side. It's the middle way. It's arriving in the middle, okay? And They call Buddhism the middle way because it's in the middle of the left and right hand path, but we're not going to get into that. We're just going to talk about just being centered and balanced, right? Between the two poles. So like heat and coolness, okay? Both are just temperature, right? And the trippy thing is that it's all relative, because in temperature, for instance, they discuss this in the Kabbalah, that it's relative, because if you're sitting at room temperature, whatever that is, 24 degrees Celsius or whatever, okay, I don't remember exactly. For the example, we're at 24. It feels good to us. Now, now if you raise the temperature to 26, that's going to feel warmer to us, right? And say 20 would feel cooler to us. But if we're in a room where it's minus 10 degrees, right, Celsius, and someone turns up the temperature to only plus 10, right, that's warmer to us. So what was once cooler is now in this situation hotter, because of the relativity about where we were before that. So that's just saying that it's like everything on the spectrum too is essential for one another. Light is just, or sorry, darkness is just the absence of light. You can't have one without the other. Just like in a drawing where you have negative space, right? If it was just all black, you wouldn't be able to see the subject in the foreground. You have to have a contrast enabled to differentiate anything on the page, right? So it's essential for one another, the polarity. And we talked about the light spectrum, temperature, but everything is like that. It's like you always want to arrive in the middle of every situation. You want to arrive in the middle of everything. That's the key to life, right? You don't want to be too much of an asceticism in life. That's what this necklace is that my girlfriend got me. The angel Pahalia of the Shen operation in Kabbalah. And one of the things basically that it tells you to look out for is being too much of an ascetic nature. And asceticism, as we know, is being a renunciate of life. You just say, the material world, I'm better than that, right? I'm holy, I'm going to go and meditate and just sit there. Well, it's like, that's not the point of this lifetime, is just to, go and die in a hole somewhere. The point of life is to still live it. And in Zen they say eat when you need to eat, sleep when you need to sleep, right? Like life still goes on. The bodhisattva is somebody that becomes enlightened. Say they go on a spirit journey like a shaman and find themselves, which is actually discovering that there is no self. That's actually what finding yourself is when you go on these retreats, the hermit's journey, right? And away from society. Once they become enlightened, they know that that's not the end all be all, is just to hold that information and to escape into a cave and live out their days there. The bodhisattva comes back into society, shares the information, as well as living life as they did before, right? The whole Buddhist koan of before enlightenment, chop wood, after enlightenment, chop wood. You still live the daily activities, but instead of being salty about them, you're joyful, you're serene, because it's a blessing. Okay, you went from, oh, this sucks, this, I can't, basically everybody in the West is so excited to die so they can go to heaven, but now you know that you're in heaven. This is what it is, you know what I mean? This is great. everything is a component of God. This is great. I'm part of, the greater process that's beyond even me. I'm just part of the unfolding. Everything's always unfolding, like the mandala, or like the rose and the Rosicrucianism, from the center point, the first emanation, ever becoming more complex, as like the 1,000-petal lotus of Buddhism, ever unfolding. Everything is just unfolding in themselves and growing, right? So once you know this, you have a better attitude towards the mundane aspects of life. You just do them because it's just what you do, and you're not salty about that. So the whole polarity, arriving in the middle, is a big thing, but just knowing that everything has its opposite and they're essential for one another is the whole thing too, right? So like we discussed that a little bit more in the cycles, where there has to be a state of decomposing and stuff, and then there's scavengers that clean it up, and it's all a cycle. Like my dad's a forester, and he was telling me how he managed forests, and I said, wouldn't that be just man letting it do its thing? Is nature not perfect already? Why does man have to get involved and manage it? And he's also into Taoism and everything, so we had a discussion on that, how I think it's because forests are like near like society, so we have to like manage them, right? Forest fires and such. But in reality, like nature manages itself. So that's a principle of polarity, that everything is dual, right? Everything has its opposite, and they're essential for one another. Now we get into the principle of rhythm, okay? So everything flows out and in, and everything has its tides. Just like the waveform we were talking about and the vibration, that this is the rule almost of non-dualism, okay? So I believe that three of these concepts and principles could almost be summed up into one, but we'll try to differentiate them a little bit here. It talks about the pendulum swinging in between polarities in this law of rhythm, right? And I just wanted to, in this section, discuss that the spiritual person that understands these laws is no longer affected by the swing of the pendulum, okay? Because he's centered. So a lot of people, their emotions are affected, like they're easily angered, easily upset. That's once we return and rise above the pendulum swing, we're no longer affected by planetary influences like the astrology, you know? We're no longer looking at things to predict our future. We're looking inside ourselves, and we're trying to become more centered and return to the all, and lose our personal identity and identify with everything, okay? When that happens, you become the eye of the storm, and you're not affected by flux. You're not thrown around, right? The outside of the hurricane is so destructive, but the center is unmoved, right? Wherever that happens, like in Nova Scotia when they had that big hurricane, the center didn't get affected. There was no destruction because there's not a lot happening there. It's like the eye of the storm. So that's what we need to become, right? In the pendulum swing, rise above it, and it's possible, okay? It is becoming centered in the storm, like I just discussed. So a lot of these concepts are non-dual in nature because everything is essential for one another. So we'll get to this in the final principle, and which I'm just going to discuss right now, is that it's the principle of gender, okay? So everything has gender. When we get into non-dualism, like I'm discussing right now, we'll take the yin and yang, for example. Everybody knows that, the black and the white, one has a little dot of each in it, showing that everything is gender and essential for one another. But in the non-dualism, if somebody's describing the true God, how God is everything and then God is no thing, not one thing, it's like taking a coin and you have heads, you have tails, they're opposites, okay? But they're still the same coin, they're still the same thing. Just like in the practice of meditation where you're breathing in, out, you're sitting zazen, you're focusing on the breath, exhaling, inhaling. The in-breath is the universe's out-breath, and your out-breath is the universe's in-breath. Constant inhale, exhale, both essential for one another, right? The best thing is to just observe the breath. So the principle of gender is that the masculine and feminine is another cheat code that you see on every single plane that is active and receptive, okay? Always have to be a receptive and active force. We know that in reproduction, gender is essential, obviously. In Egypt, they talk about this concept with Osiris. His bottom half of his body is mummified, like hard and like almost like a cup, right? And the top is black skin, like the waters of the Nile, which is saying that you have the receptive element, which is man, and then you have the active vivifying force, which is spirit or the universal unconscious, going into that. That's what man is. It's both. It's not one or the other. We're not just material. We're not just like spirit. You know, we are both. We have a body to interact with this world. We don't need to ascend the world. We're both. The Black Nile being that it vivifies the land, which is Egypt, which is the receptive force. But in the Egyptian gods, Isis being the moist air, okay? She is the Isis meaning ice, but coming from that water vibe. Is that Isis is essential so the earth isn't dried out from the sun, the masculine aspect, or it would just be a dry desert. So it's like you need both there. You need the feminine aspect and the masculine aspect. And everything can be likened to gender, like even in the mind, right? You have your right and left hemispheres. You have the analytical aspect, and then you have the creative aspect. And then Ra, the new man, is the amalgamation of both of these things, because it's the righteous action. It's the righteousness of the femininity with her creativeness, intuition, purposeful, soulful, sweet energy backing the action. So everything we do in this world, we should be like a righteous king, where our action isn't selfish. It's based off of the feminine nature, right? And we, as humans too, we have an anima and an animus in us, as Carl Jung says, which is a feminine and a masculine nature. We take that principle to God, okay? The universal unconscious isn't masculine, like we call him, God, him. It's androgynous in nature. And it's not masculine and feminine, androgynous. It's neither. Okay, it's before that happened. In the tree of life in Kabbalah, the first emanation, Keter, the crown, boom, splits off into the pillars of severity and mercy, black and white, masculine and feminine, right? So that's before that. When that happens, you get the Trinity at the first aspect of it, which is God, and then the Holy Father and the Holy Mother. And then you have the little son too, which is, Osiris, the Father. You have the mother, Isis. You have the son, Horus. Okay, Osiris is the god of the underworld in Egypt. Horus has to go to the underworld, come back up. Basically, we that is a metaphor for we have to go inside ourselves and go into our shadow. We have to come up from that, and we have to overcome our own darkness, right? You see this in the hero's journey all over the world. And also, if we're coming back to cycles, that it's a cyclical thing, because that's the sun going beneath the equator into darkness and coming up again. And it's a constant cycle, right? So if ever we find ourselves in darkness, in depression, we need to understand that that's essential for our happiness too. Because just like the seasons, in Canada it gets cold as hell, right? It makes us appreciate our summers just a little bit more. By the equator, it's always lukewarm there, or it's always super hot, and they take it for granted. Okay, so when we're depressed, we need to understand that, okay, it'll feel really good when I'm happy. And we know that if everything's cyclical, it's going to come around to where we rise out of that again. And the deal is with that is, if we were happy all the time, then it wouldn't be happy, would it? It'd just be neutrality, stagnant neutrality. So a lot, like, there's a stage in Buddhism that's the state of non-return, where when you start to understand these 7 Hermetic Laws of Hermeticism, or what the Buddha was talking about, wherever you find this information from whatever mystic you're a disciple of at the beginning, before you understand that you have the inner Buddha in you, and you know, but until you get to that stage, wherever you find this from, it's liberating. And then you understand that, okay, I can be happy all the time, and I'm not going to keep repeating the cycle of falling into depression and being happy. You just have a gnosis, you just have a knowing, where you can't unknow certain things, right? So once you know certain things, you're good. You escape the wheel of samsara, in a sense, in the mental activity. You're still going to die, right? But you're no longer affected by emotions, because you've understood that there is no emotions. Well, there's emotions, but that's not you, right? If we're talking about what we're not the body. We're not our thoughts, because those come and go. We don't have to be attached to them. Emotions too, we mustn't be attached to emotions. They're just something that happens to us, you know. Just like touch, like you can even mind over matter, kind of like escape pain in your body, because that's just an electrical impulse to your brain through neurons. Like, that's not you at the end of the day, right? You can feel the pain, but you can almost ascend pain too, if you're that level of badass. Like, they teach that in CIA and Navy SEALs go through like torture training and stuff, just to like put their mind into wherever's hurting and breathe out the pain. With every breath, they picture the pain leaving, and it works. Okay, and then the last 7th principle is the principle of cause and effect. And this principle says that nothing happens by chance, all actions have consequences, and there are no accidents, okay? And we all know that, like, that's just basic, like, you know, you push dominoes over, eventually it'll come back and hit you. If you're sitting by dominoes, okay? And that's also how karma works, is that karma might not be instant, since it's so far in the future. Occasionally people don't associate it as karma. They might call it bad luck, because it's a chain reaction that happens, and it might be a little bit delayed, but it's still the effect of the initial cause, right? And cause and effect too is how everything came to be. Like, the particle in my eye was once a particle of a mountain. It was once a carbon literally comprising a mountain. Now it's in my eye. That's how you can prove that we are the earth, just by science. So the trippy thing is with this, okay, is that, you know, if you take that little desktop toy type of thing where there's like all those little metal balls, and you take one and you lift it up and it hits all the balls, and then on the other side it lifts up one. The trippy thing is, if you take two, there's 5 balls, right? If you take 2 of them and you lift 2 up, boom, it hits them, and then two come up on the other side. You keep doing that. You raise 3 come up. You take 4, you raise 4 of only 5, even 1 sitting there. When they all touch, boom, 4 will come up on the other side. So whatever you put out, you get back, right? And that's what the Tao talks about, which isn't the 7 Hermetic Laws, but it ties into everything, is that everything is the opposite of how the West thinks, right? We think that to attain wealth we have to grind. No, we have to give it away, put it out there, and then you'll get it back, right? And the art of not trying to, and surrendering, that's how you actually manifest. Okay? I had my dream girl in my mind. I prayed for her, you know? I tried to manifest her. I said I'd like her or someone of equal value. 2 years later, I just lived my life, you know? I put the intention out there, and then I just kept living my life, dating other girls and stuff. And then I broke up with a girl, and I told myself, you know what, I'm just not gonna try right now to push and to force things with relationships. I'm just gonna focus on myself. The next day, I get my message returned from that girl, my girlfriend, right? Literally my dream girl. And it's like right when I surrendered and like gave up is when I got what I wanted. So life doesn't come by forcing things. It's always do the opposite of how we're taught when we're kids, you know? Whatever energy you put out is what you're going to get back. Just point blank, period. But I don't want to yap too long on all this stuff. I just wanted to go off the dome, not look at anything, you know, just speak from what I've learned and just explain these principles from what I've learned. You can take everything and continue to study them yourself. I highly suggest you do, you know. Get into the Kabbalah, read the Kabbalah, go listen to Alan Watts talk about Zen and Taoism, go listen to Masonic stuff talking about the trestle board and, you know, the poles of Yakin and Boaz and how you want to be the middle pillar, and go understand these things. I just wanted to give a brief overview, because if you know these things, even just from what I described to you, these 7 laws, you can operate in this world and really be centered, and every decision come to the middle of it, right? You don't want to be too extreme to one side or the other, because you know that both are essential to one another. So that pretty much sums up the 7 Hermetic Laws, you know? I love yapping about this stuff because in all cultures and all wisdom traditions you see this, you know. Pythagoras, he talks about this stuff. Like it's just a rabbit hole. Like all of these concepts can be fleshed out. But the thing is, in Taoism, it's like simmered down, you know, and these 7 Hermetic Laws are just 7 laws, boom, simmered down. In the West, we always like to categorize things, okay? And we always like to chop them up and specialize in different things. That's how you bastardize wisdom, is when you try to over-intellectualize things. Everything should be simple concepts. It's all very simple, okay? That's what this is all about. we shouldn't get into the complexities of everything and try to prove everything with like science and stuff. You can prove it with science, but you don't have to describe it all in one sitting. You can go and do your work for yourself, fact check me on all this stuff. Okay, it's all there in sacred geometry and stuff, frequencies and all that. It's all there. But what I'm talking about is the holy science from Egypt, okay, initially was a holistic system. There was no religion and science and chemistry and psychology and religion. It was all one. There was one worldview, and it all proved everything, and everything made sense on one thread. Everything was like beads in a necklace. And even in the Kabbalah, you know, their number system is also their alphabet. A is 1 and B is 2, and their whole like cosmology, you could say. 1 and A, Aleph is like the first emanation, okay? The first cause. So a lot of these holistic traditions, now in the West, we try to specialize, and there's a specialist in everything. We now have what was once alchemy in Egypt, the holy science too, where you're doing the inner work as well as turning base metals into gold. It was transmutation, right? It was turning the one energy to the next, to its opposite, like in the law of polarity. It was turning your vices into your virtues, okay? And from alchemy, we got chemistry now, right? We didn't get smarter. We took a fragment of what was once whole, and now we specialize in chemistry. Chemistry, chem, C-H-E-M, comes from K-H-E-M, Kemet, which was Egypt. We got chemistry from Egypt. And now we have psychology and psychiatry and therapy and all this. Well, that didn't exist back in the day. There was no therapists. There was masters. There was hierophants, right? There was spiritual leaders. There was pharaohs. In different traditions, there was monks, different holy men. This is who you'd go to speak to about becoming whole in yourself. You don't go talk to a therapist. Now they don't have the answers. Modern psychotherapy, they don't have the answers either, because it's far removed from the holistic system, okay? So back in the day, people would go to a monk and they tell them what's up, you know? They'd say, there's no self that is suffering, okay? Don't be attached. Non-attachment. Please focus on this. Please focus on not desiring anything. Because a lot of the times what we desire, when we get it, we discover that we actually don't want it. Lots of wealthy millionaires are unhappy, right? The monks would tell us this, not therapists. And in return, the monks would go on alms round and go to the people in the village, and they'd feed them, like a symbiotic relationship. Now in the West, everybody's specializing in things. We thought we got smarter, but we got a lot stupider because it's all fragmented right now, right? So we got to go back to the old way. We got to return to the one. Everything is simple concepts. And I just wanted to simplify it for people and to show that these concepts are easy to understand. Meditate on these concepts, understand them in and out, and apply them to life, you know? Because, like, I could literally go on forever, because this is the fundamentals of everything. Like, polarity and stuff. I didn't even get into it, but, like, in the principle of correspondence, as above so below, as above so below, as well as polarity and gender, everything is a toroid field, like magnetically. So it's like an apple shape. You have blue shift on the top and red shift. And the thing is that the earth has this magnetic field too. Our bodies have this magnetic field. Everything has this magnetic field. Everything works off this. And like, I'm just saying that these concepts are cool because everything is a lot simpler than we think. You know, it's not a constant striving for knowledge. Like, you're probably going to forget a lot of the knowledge that you pick up, right? But the wisdom, the simple wisdom, stays with you forever, because everywhere you look, you start to see it. And you start to see through the matrix and see that, see these correspondences, right? It's just, like, I could go on forever. So I'm going to end it there. And I just noticed about 10 minutes ago that my mic is way over there. So I'm going to have to turn this up post-production. Hopefully it's not too weird and, like, yeah, muffled or whatever. But anyways, that is the 7 Hermetic Laws. I just wanted to get on here and yap for a little bit. And maybe I'll throw some pictures up. But yeah, thanks for listening. And go do your own research. Go find out yourself, you know. Yeah, that's what's up. Thanks for watching. See you later.